The deep black of space stretched endlessly around the small, human exploration vessel as it glided toward a pale gray moon that hung quietly in the void. The crew had been told countless times before this was a simple mission, nothing more than a mineral survey for the Galactic Alliance. Their orders were clear: scan the surface, take samples, mark the coordinates, and leave. The moon had been catalogued as lifeless: no plants, no water, no sign of past civilizations, nothing but rock and dust. That was why the mission had been assigned to a small team of only 4 humans, and their cargo of basic mining equipment inside. The ship, the hum of the engines was steady, a sound so constant that it had faded into the background for the crew. Leader, a calm and steady man named Daniel, sat in the front seat, watching the moon grow larger on the display. Beside him, the engineer Mark adjusted his readings, tapping the side of the scanner when it flickered with static in the back. 2 other crew members, Lena the surveyor and Tom the geologist, were checking their suits and tools. Landing was smooth and quiet as the ship settled on the moon's surface, sending up a thin cloud of dust that slowly drifted down in the low gravity. Hatch opened, and the 4 humans stepped onto the barren ground. Their boots left sharp prints in the pale dust, and every movement seemed slower, heavier, as if the silence of the place weighed on them. The horizon was flat and empty in all directions, broken only by jagged ridges far in the distance. The airless sky was pure black, and the distant sun cast sharp shadows that made the ground look carved from silver. Mark set up the portable scanners while Lena began sweeping the ground for surface mineral traces. The readings came back exactly as expected: small deposits of metals the Alliance could use, but nothing extraordinary. Tom moved away from the group, drawn toward a ridge where strange patterns in the rock caught his eye. He knelt, running his glove over the grooves. They were too even, too deliberate to be natural. Daniel walked over, frowning as he saw them. From a distance they might have looked like cracks, but up close they formed sharp angles and repeating shapes. Mark joined them and ran a more detailed scan. The device beeped softly, and the screen lit with a new signal: something deep underground, not a random clump of metal, but a structured mass of unknown composition. The numbers danced across the screen, showing that it was at least 50 meters below the surface. They exchanged quick glances. Each of them knew what this meant and what the Alliance would want them to do. The mission order said nothing about digging this deep, but the signal was too strange to ignore. Lena's eyes were bright with excitement. Tom was already unpacking the portable drill. Daniel hesitated for a moment, thinking of the warnings they had been given about staying within mission scope. Then his curiosity took over. Humans had not traveled this far just to turn back at the first sign of the unknown. It took hours of work to reach the source of the readings. The drill cut through layers of dust and stone, sending vibrations through the ground. At last the bit struck something hard that rang like metal when touched. They widened the hole and cleared away the debris until the top of a huge structure came into view. Its surface was smooth and silver, with faint patterns etched into it. The designs glowed softly as if reacting to the light of their lamps. Mark ran his fingers over them and felt a slight warmth pulsing through the material. Ordered the hole widened further so they could climb down. They descended into the dim chamber that opened below the surface. It was vast and cold, the air stale but still breathable thanks to the sealed suits. The walls curved smoothly with no seams, as if the whole place had been carved from a single piece of metal. In the center stood a machine unlike anything they had seen before, towering above them with an intricate network of coils, panels, and crystal-like structures. It looked ancient, yet untouched by time. Air seemed to hum faintly around it, a low vibration that made the hair on their arms stand up. Lena moved closer, shining her light along the base. She saw no dust, no signs of decay, as if the chamber had been sealed for centuries. Daniel called for Mark to run another scan, but the moment the engineer's device activated, the hum grew louder. Soft glow in the machine's patterns brightened slowly, and the floor beneath their feet trembled. Tom took a cautious step back, but Mark remained staring at the readings on his scanner. They were unlike anything he had ever recorded. The energy signature was complex, layered, almost alive. Daniel raised a hand for everyone to hold position, but the machine's glow continued to strengthen, as if responding to their very presence. The hum deepened into a rhythmic pulse, echoing through the chamber walls. Lena's voice was quiet but tense as she asked if they should leave before things went further. Daniel hesitated again, weighing orders against the undeniable pull of discovery. Mark ignored the warning and touched a raised symbol on the machine's side. His glove lit faintly where it made contact, and a burst of light spread across the entire device. The chamber filled with a sudden warmth, and the glow from the patterns became a steady, pale blue. The hum stopped, replaced by a sound like a deep, slow breath. They all stood frozen, the silence now heavier than before. Then, without warning, a thin beam of light shot from the machine toward the ceiling, painting strange symbols in the air. The shape shifted and twisted into forms none of them recognized, and yet something about the patterns felt almost familiar, like the half-forgotten memory of a dream. Daniel's heart pounded as he realized they had just awakened something that had been sleeping here for longer than humanity had existed in space. The light symbols dissolved into the air, and the machine settled into a steady glow. Its presence felt alive now, aware of them, watching them. The four humans exchanged looks, none of them sure whether they had just found the greatest discovery of their careers, or unleashed something far beyond their understanding. And deep in that stillness, Daniel knew one thing for certain: whatever this was, it was not part of the mission they had been given. The chamber seemed to breathe with them as they stood in its heart. The faint glow from the ancient machine cast soft blue light that shimmered over the smooth metal walls. Shadows shifted as if the place had its own quiet pulse. Daniel kept his eyes on the towering structure, trying to read its intent, if such a thing was even possible. Mark's scanner flickered with unstable readings, as if the machine's energy overwhelmed its ability to process. Lena's voice came through the comms, low but trembling, asking if they were in danger. Daniel did not answer right away, his mind working through possibilities, while his heartbeat thundered in his ears. The soft glow brightened again without warning, thin lines of light racing along the floor in patterns that reached out from the machine toward each of them, stopping just short of their boots. It felt like the device was reaching toward them. Curious and cautious, Mark stepped forward, and the lines shifted to follow his movement. Tom gripped his tool tighter, his knuckles pale beneath the gloves. His instincts told him that ancient things buried this deep were never harmless. A sound like the distant crack of ice filled the chamber, and the air felt charged, as if a storm had formed around them. The machine's patterns changed, flowing faster, now symbols flickering over its surface and vanishing before they could be studied. Daniel ordered everyone to back away, but Mark's curiosity was stronger than caution. He moved closer, placing a palm against the side panel. The moment his glove made contact, the vibrations in the air deepened, and the light around them intensified. The walls of the chamber rippled with projected images, tall insect-like figures moving with deliberate grace. Their limbs were long and jointed, their faces covered with smooth plates that glinted under unseen light. The images played in silence, shifting from scenes of peaceful construction to the chaos of warships burning in the void, strange weapons firing beams that shattered hulls with a single strike. Daniel realized with a sinking feeling that they were witnessing fragments of history left behind by the machine's creators. As the visions faded, a voice filled the chamber, not spoken aloud but resonating inside their helmets. The tone was deep and steady, layered with something almost human, yet not entirely. The words formed in their own language, though the voice had never heard it before. It said, "You are not the ones who made me, but you carry the spark." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Lena whispered, asking if they all heard the same thing, and they nodded slowly. Machine seemed to study them, its lights shifting like eyes that could see more than just shapes and colors. Daniel asked carefully what it meant by spark. The answer came in fragments, images of human faces mixed with the alien ones from before, patterns of thought, lines of decisions. Moments of unpredictability. In its own strange way, the machine was saying that humans reminded it of the ones who built it, perhaps not in appearance, but in spirit. Mark asked if the creators were still alive. The machine paused as if weighing the truth, then it projected another vision, a barren world scarred by craters and blackened skies. Ships broken and scattered across a wasteland. A single phrase followed: "They are gone." Daniel felt a heaviness settle over them. This was not just a discovery, it was a tomb, a monument to a people who had vanished long before humanity ever reached the stars. The lights along the floor began to move again, forming a path toward a section of the chamber wall that split open with a slow grinding sound. Beyond lay a narrow corridor, lined with more of the glowing patterns. The machine's voice returned. This place was built to watch, to wait, to guard against their return. Daniel asked who they were, but the only answer was a rush of cold air through the corridor and an image of black angular ships that looked nothing like the graceful vessels of the creators. The image burned with a sense of danger and hatred. Lena wanted to leave. She said this was no longer about minerals or exploration, it was about something far beyond their reach. Tom agreed, saying that if the Alliance knew about this, they would send soldiers, not surveyors. But Daniel could not ignore the feeling that they were meant to see this, meant to understand. He took a step toward the corridor, and the lights followed as if guiding him deeper. The others hesitated, but followed him one by one, drawn by the strange pull of the unknown. The passage led to a smaller chamber, where a console rose from the floor. Its surface was smooth, but shifted when touched, as if the material was both solid and liquid. The machine spoke again. "Through this, I can see your worlds, your people, but only if you choose." The console glimmered softly, waiting for input. Mark's fingers hovered above it, but Daniel stopped him, asking what would happen if they agreed. The answer came as a vision of stars linked together by lines, forming a web across the galaxy. At each point, there was a flicker of light, like a watchtower in the void, and in the far distance, a dark mass moved slowly toward the web, consuming its light piece by piece. The meaning was clear. The machine was part of something larger, a network of defenses meant to protect against that encroaching darkness. But it could not act alone. It had been silent for thousands of years, waiting for someone who could finish the mission. Its creators had begun. Daniel felt the weight of that choice settle on his shoulders. They were not soldiers, they were minor scientists, explorers. Yet here was a task that felt both impossible and inevitable. Before anyone could speak, the ground shook and a deep rumble echoed through the walls. The machine's voice hardened. "They are near." Its lights flared bright enough to make them shield their eyes. The path they had taken here lit up in urgent pulses, telling them to return to the surface. Daniel's thoughts raced. If the threat was real, and it was coming now, then they might not have time to decide anything at all. They hurried back through the main chamber, the machine's glow following them like a living presence. As they reached the rope line leading to the surface, Daniel looked back one last time. The towering structure stood silent but watchful, its patterns shifting slowly in ways he no longer thought were random. The voice spoke again in his mind. "You are not our creators, but you share their spark. You'll be asked to choose, and when you do, the galaxy will change." The message lingered as they climbed back to the surface. The cold, barren moon looked the same as when they arrived, but Daniel knew nothing about their mission was simple anymore. Somewhere beyond the horizon, something was approaching, and whether they wanted it or not, they had just been pulled into a story written long before humans took to the stars. The pale gray surface of the moon stretched endlessly under the black sky as the crew hurried back toward the ship. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the ground itself did not want to let them go. Daniel kept looking over his shoulder, half expecting to see something rise from the horizon, but the only movement was the faint shimmer of dust stirred by their boots. The airless silence pressed against them, and every sound inside their helmets seemed too loud. They reached the ship and began stowing their equipment, but before The hatch could close. The ground gave a low vibration, not enough to knock them over, but enough to make them freeze. The light from their helmets caught faint blue lines, spreading across the dust like veins of glowing water. They came from the direction of the underground chamber, snaking toward the ship and stopping just short of its landing gear. Daniel knew without needing to ask that the machine was not done with them yet. A voice filled the air inside their helmets, the same deep, steady tone they had heard below. It said, "Do not leave." The words were not a command, but a request weighted with meaning. Daniel glanced at the others. Mark's hands tightened on the hatch controls. Lena shook her head slowly. Tom's expression was unreadable. The voice continued, "The ones who made me are gone, but their work must be finished. The enemy they fought still lives, and they will come again." Crew stood in tense silence. Daniel asked what the enemy wanted, and the answer came not as words, as an image in their minds, a star field with bright points of light connected by faint lines, each light representing a world. Then a shadow moved across the image, swallowing those lights one by one. The sense of hunger and destruction that followed made the hairs on their arms rise even through their suits. The machine said, "I was made to watch and to act when they return. But I cannot act alone. My strength is bound until one with the spark takes the mantle." Mark asked what mantle meant, and the machine showed them another vision, a human standing at the heart of the great chamber, their hands on the shifting console. Lights pouring into them, filling their body and mind with knowledge that was both alien and familiar around them. Machine's patterns blazed bright enough to pierce the darkness beyond the chamber walls. Ships moved in the void under their command, striking the shadow with precision and creativity. The image faded, leaving a silence that seemed to stretch endlessly. Tom spoke for the first time since they had surfaced, saying they were not warriors, they were explorers, minor scientists. The machine replied, "That is why you can do what others cannot. You adapt, you learn, you are unpredictable." Daniel thought about the wars humanity had fought, the disasters they had survived, the stubborn way they refused to yield, even in the face of impossible odds. Perhaps the machine was right. Perhaps there was something in them that could finish what the creators had started. Lena still wanted to leave. She said this was not their fight, that the Alliance had fleets and soldiers for this kind of thing. Mark countered that the Alliance might never even believe them without proof, and if the enemy really was coming, there might not be time to wait for others. Daniel listened to both sides, feeling the decision weigh heavier with each passing second. He knew that staying could mean risking all their lives, but leaving could mean abandoning something that might be the galaxy's only hope. The voice returned softer, now almost like it could feel his hesitation. "You do not have to decide alone. The choice can be shared. The mantle is not for one, but for many." Daniel asked what it meant, and the machine showed an image of the four of them together, standing around the console, each touching its surface at the same time. The glow spread between them, connecting them, as if they were one mind, one will. The sense of unity was overwhelming, a feeling that together they could stand against anything. Before they could respond, a sudden burst of static filled their comms, and the ship's sensors lit with alerts. Something massive was moving toward the moon from deep space. The machine's voice sharpened. "They are closer than I thought. The choice must be made now." The glowing lines on the ground brightened, leading back toward the hidden chamber like a trail of fire. Daniel knew then that they were out of time. They followed the lights without speaking, moving quickly but carefully over the uneven ground. The entrance to the chamber yawned open as they approached, the ropes still hanging where they had left them. They descended into the cold blue glow, which was stronger now, filling every curve of the walls. The machine stood waiting, its patterns shifting in a slow, steady rhythm, as if it had been preparing for them. Console rose again from the floor, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. The machine spoke, "This will bind you to me. It will open the gates and awaken the others that still sleep across the stars. Through you I will see, and through me you will act." Daniel looked at each of his crew. Their faces were tense, but there was something else there too, something like resolve. They had seen the visions, they had felt the truth in the machine's words. Mark stepped forward, first placing his hand on the surface. The metal rippled beneath his touch, sending a faint glow into his arm. Tom followed, then Lena, and finally Daniel. The moment all four made contact, the glow surged around them, filling the chamber with a wave of light. It was warm and heavy, flowing into their minds and leaving behind fragments of alien thoughts and knowledge. Daniel felt stars moving through him like grains of sand, each one connected to a thread of purpose. He saw ships he had never imagined, defenses hidden in places no one would think to look. He felt the weight of a war fought long before his birth, and the unfinished hope of those who had fought it. The light dimmed, but did not fade entirely. The machine's voice was calm again. You are bound now. The enemy will not find you unprepared. The chamber seemed smaller somehow, as if the light had pushed the shadows away. Daniel knew that nothing about their mission was the same anymore. They had come to this moon for minerals, but they would leave carrying something far greater. Somewhere above them, space was no longer empty. The enemy was coming, and they were no longer just a crew of explorers. They were the inheritors of a fight that had waited centuries for someone to finish it. And for better or worse, that someone was them. The surface of the moon was no longer silent. The ground gave off a faint tremor that seemed to run beneath their boots as they climbed back to the surface. The stars above looked the same, but Daniel could feel that the emptiness of space was broken. Now something was coming closer with every passing moment, and the air inside his helmet felt heavier, as if his body already knew what waited out there. Ship's sensors were still flashing when they reached it. Red icons pulsed across the small display, showing multiple objects closing fast from the far edge of the system. The patterns were wrong for any Galactic Alliance vessel. There were no identification beacons, no signs of communication. Just silent approach at a speed that ignored any caution. The machine's voice came through again. Not loud, but with a weight that silenced all other thoughts. They have found us. The time for waiting is over. A moment later, the horizon flickered with light. Small points at first, then growing until sleek black shapes cut against the stars. Their hulls caught no reflection, and their forms were sharp-edged like blades built to slice through the void. Daniel felt a cold rush in his stomach just looking at them. The visions from before had shown these ships, and now here they were alive and moving toward them. The crew stood frozen for a moment, before Mark's voice cracked through the comms, saying they needed a plan. The machine's glow reached up from the ground again, forming lines that led back toward the chamber. The enemy ships were still far enough that they had minutes, but not much more. The voice spoke. The defense system cannot fire without a mind to guide it. I am old, my process is slow. I need one of you to merge fully. Daniel knew what that meant. The visions had shown a human standing at the heart of the machine, commanding its power. But the connection would not be simple. It would reach into the body and mind, and there was no way to know if someone could come back from it. Unchanged, Lena looked from one crewmate to the other. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She said she would do it. Daniel shook his head, saying the risk was too high, but she only answered that risk was already here for all of them, and they needed someone willing to try. Tom started to object, but the machine cut him off. The merge will be painful, and it will change the one who accepts it. But without it, this place will fall. Daniel met Lena's gaze and saw no fear, only determination. He gave a single nod, and they followed the glowing path back below. The chamber felt different, now brighter, faster, as if the walls themselves were awake. The console had risen again, its surface rippling with restless energy. The machine's voice was steady. This will open every system in this moon to you. You will see through my eyes, and I will act through your thoughts. Lena stepped forward without hesitation. She removed her gloves and placed both hands on the console. The light surged upward, wrapping around her arms and shoulders, pulling her forward. Her breath caught in her throat, and Daniel could see her body tense as if every nerve was lit with fire. The patterns from the machine raced across her suit and into her helmet, lighting the inside with a pale blue glow. her voice came through the coms, but it was layered now, part human, part something else. I can see them. They are moving in formation. They think this is empty. Daniel asked what they should do, and she laughed softly, not with humor, but with a kind of fierce focus. We surprised them. Around them, the chamber shifted. Panels on the walls slid open, revealing crystalline structures that began to hum. The floor shook gently as power surged through the ancient systems. Far above on the moon's surface, vast plates rotated, opening to reveal hidden weapons buried for millennia. The enemy ships altered their path slightly, sensing something, but they did not slow. Lena's voice filled the chamber again, quick and certain. They are scanning. They think it is just an old ruin. They are wrong. The first beam of energy erupted from the surface without warning, cutting through the darkness and striking the lead ship. The black hull glowed briefly before cracking apart in a silent explosion of light and debris. The other ships scattered, breaking formation, but Lena was already moving her hands across the console, guiding the machine's fire. She was not aiming like a human pilot would. Instead, she moved in patterns that made no sense to Daniel, but seemed to outthink the enemy. Before they could react, one ship veered hard to the left and fired a pulse of dark energy toward the surface. The impact shook the chamber, sending dust from the ceiling, but the walls held. The machine's voice merged with Lena's, now both speaking as one. They are testing our defenses. We give them something to fear. The next volley came not from one weapon, but from multiple points across the moon, hitting the enemy from angles they could not anticipate. One ship was torn apart. Another was forced into the path of a sudden gravitational pull created by the moon's systems, smashing it against the rocky surface. The last two ships pulled back, firing erratic shots as they tried to escape. Lena's breathing was heavy, but her hands did not leave the console. Daniel asked if they should let them go. The machine's voice in her answer was cold. They will return with more. The chamber shook again as the final volley struck one ship square on, ripping it open in a flash of white light. The last vessel turned sharply and vanished into the void, using a jump drive to escape the silence after the battle. Was strange. It was not the stillness of before, but something deeper, a quiet that felt earned. Lena slowly stepped back from the console. Her legs shook, and Daniel caught her before she could fall. Her eyes were unfocused, and her voice faint. I saw everything. Not just the battle, but the places this system connects to. I saw others sleeping like this one, waiting for someone to wake them. The machine's glow dimmed to a steady pulse, as if conserving strength after the fight. You have done well, it said. But this was only the first wave. The enemy will send more, and others will face them, or fall. The bond between you and me is now permanent. Through you, I will speak, and through me, you will reach the rest of the network. Daniel looked at Lena and saw in her expression that she understood the weight of what they had begun. They had defended the moon, but the real war was only starting. They left the chamber slowly, the ground still warm under their boots. The stars above seemed unchanged, but Daniel knew they were not. The enemy had seen them, and that meant the galaxy's quiet days were over. The crew stood together at the edge of the landing site, watching the endless sky. Lena leaned against the ship, still pale but steady. She smiled faintly and said the machine was right. They never saw it coming. The battle had ended hours ago. But the moon still carried the echo of it. The scars left by enemy fire cut across the rocky surface, and the faint smell of scorched metal drifted in the thin artificial atmosphere near the defense points. The crew moved slowly around the ship, checking systems and repairing what they could, but their minds were far away. Each of them knew the fight they had just survived was not the end. It was the beginning of something far greater and far more dangerous. Daniel stood near the edge of the landing site, his visor lifted to take in the view of the endless black around them. The stars shimmered cold and distant, but now they no longer looked like symbols of peaceful exploration. They looked like markers in a vast battlefield waiting for the next move. Behind him, Lena rested against the hull, still pale from the merge, but more alert than before. Her eyes were steady, but held a weight he had never seen in her before. Tom and Mark were talking quietly over the equipment case there. Voices low, as if afraid to disturb the fragile calm that had settled over the place. Machine's voice came again, softer now, as though it spoke only to them. You have done what others could not. You have turned an old watchtower into a shield. Once more. But the shield is only one piece of the chain. The image appeared again in their minds. The web of stars, each pointed defense waiting in silence. Some glowed faintly, others were dark and lifeless. The machine said, there are still many sleeping. You have the key to awaken them, and now the choice is yours. Daniel asked what would happen if they chose to leave and return to the Alliance. The answer was not a threat, but a truth. The enemy will move unhindered. They will break the chain piece by piece until nothing remains. Daniel felt the truth of those words deep in his chest. He had seen how quickly the enemy ships moved, how precise their strikes were. If this moon had fallen, there would be nothing to slow them, Lena spoke quietly, saying. She could feel the connection even now, as if threads of light stretched from her mind into the dark between stars. She knew where some of the other defense systems were hidden. She could sense their silence like distant echoes waiting for a call. Daniel saw in her eyes that she was no longer just one of the crew. The machine had left something inside her, and whether she wanted it or not, she was part of this fight now. Tom finally broke his silence, saying they could not do it alone. They were a survey team, not a fleet, Mark agreed, but added that they did not have to fight every battle themselves. The Alliance might not believe them at first, but if they brought proof, if they activated enough of the defenses, then the truth would be impossible to ignore. Daniel knew it was risky. The Alliance would try to control the systems, maybe even shut them down out of fear. But doing nothing was no longer an option. The machine spoke again. Before you leave, I will give you something to carry. A section of the wall opened with a slow hiss, revealing a small sphere of crystalline metal. It pulsed with the same pale light that ran through the chamber. The machine said, this holds the map and the knowledge of how to wake the others. It cannot be copied. It must be protected. If it is lost, the chain will break again. Daniel took the sphere and felt its warmth in his hands as if it were alive. They returned to the ship together. The engines hummed back to life, and the landing gear lifted from the dust. The view of the moon's surface shrank as they rose, and the faint lines of the machine's glowing patterns were still visible even from high above. It looked less like a lifeless rock now and more like a silent guardian keeping watch over the dark around it. As the ship climbed higher, the machine's voice came one last time, not through the comms, but in their minds. You are not our creators, but you may become what they could not. Remember the spark. Daniel felt a strange mix of pride and fear in those words. The responsibility was heavy, but it was theirs now. No one had chosen them, but no one else had been here to accept it. The stars shifted as the ship turned toward open space. Lena sat in the co-pilot seat, her gaze fixed on a point far away. Where she sat, another sleeping defense waited. Mark was already running calculations for the jump while Tom checked the weapon systems they had salvaged from the moon. Daniel looked over his crew and felt something he had not expected. They were tired, battered, and far from safe yet. There was a unity in their movements that had not been there before. They were no longer four separate people following orders. They were a team bound by something larger than themselves. The jump engines engaged with a deep vibration. The stars stretched into long lines of light, and then folded into the swirling patterns of hyperspace inside. The cockpit, the crystal sphere, rested in a secured compartment, its steady pulse matching the faint rhythm in Lena's voice as she murmured coordinates. Daniel kept his eyes on the shifting lights ahead, knowing that every jump from here on would carry them closer to danger, but also closer to the chance of saving countless worlds. There was no grand farewell to the moon, no ceremony to mark the end of their mission. It was simply a turning point, one that none of them could have predicted when they first set out. The ship moved smoothly through hyperspace, and for a moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of the engines. Daniel allowed himself a faint smile, not of relief, but of resolve. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. He thought back to the orders they had been given at the start of this journey, a simple mineral survey, a routine job in a forgotten corner of space. None of those orders had prepared them for what they found or for the choice they had made. He glanced at Lena, whose eyes still carried a distant glow from the merge, and at the sphere that held the map to the rest of the chain. Somewhere out there, the enemy was already preparing their next move, and the Alliance still had no idea what was coming. The crew had time to awaken more defenses, but not much. They would need to be fast, they would need to be clever, and they would need to be ready to fight in ways no one else could. Daniel tightened his grip on the controls, and the ship surged forward into the vast UNKNOWN as the coordinates for the next jump locked in. He allowed the thought to form fully in his mind, and the words slipped out quietly to himself. That definitely wasn't part of the mission. The end.